So blend shapes are also really useful for setting up characters and rigs. I am going to create a very simple eyelid. That's not going to look very good, but it's a brush job. Okay. All right, so here's our eyelid. And let's say we wanted the eyelid to close. And this is, so basically a blend shape is changing the between, or sort of morphing between two states of the geometry. So you can't really do this just with simple transforms because it's all one piece of geometry. So what you want to do to create a blend shape is basically you take duplicates of the mesh and you make changes to the duplicates and then you set it up so that it morphs between them. So I'm just going to duplicate this. So I'm going to call this one eyelid base, and I'm going to call this one eyelid mid, and then I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to call this eyelid closed. And it doesn't really matter where these are, but the important thing is to not freeze the transformations, because if you freeze the transformations, then Maya will assume that the change is somewhere over here, when in reality you're just wanting it to be set back to 0. So on the first one, the translates, and maybe we should have frozen the rotate as well. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But basically, the best practice is to have your geometry, your modeling finished, freeze the transformations on it, delete the history, and then make duplicates that are the blend shapes. But don't freeze the transformations on those. Bless you. So I am going to sort of select with a very small fall off the actually, let's do this. No, come on. Okay, I'm going to select the top lid, and then I'm going to take the rotate tool and I'm going to snap the rotate manipulator to this kind of corner vertex by holding D and V and then middle mouse snapping, moving on that vertex. And that way, then I've got this, the rotation at the right point. This is kind of rough and dirty. You would want to actually take time on the manipulation, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm just creating an eyelid that is partway closed. And in fact, because I'm kind of most of the way there, I'm just going to delete this one and duplicate this one. And because it's from the same sort of source originally, it'll work. The blend shapes work on the vertex, the point order. And what that means is each of these vertices has a number. And in order for this to work properly, the vertex number has to be, like the same vertex has to be called the same thing when on each of these different models. If I were to put an edge loop in here on this model, then that would change the number of vertices and the number of and the numbering of the vertices. And so when it tried to morph between them, it would just get messed up. So it's important that the geometry stays the same in terms of its actual, what the components are. And again, this is really ugly and dirty, but okay, there's our eyelid that's closed. So now what we want to do is create a blend between these on our base object. We can come down to create deformers blend shape, and let's take a look at the options. So we could give it a name if we wanted to. We can call this eyelid blink. And because we have multiple in-between states, or like a single in-between state, we want to make sure that in-between is checked. And the rest is fine. And so the selection order is important here. So if I understand it, we select our first different state, then our next different state, and if I had a few more, I would choose next different state as along the transformation. And then the last thing that we select is our base, the one that we want to apply it to. And then we're going to hit create. And so now the base object has a new input called eyelid blink. And it's got a channel here that if we look at that. So when we change it to 0.5, then it should be exactly the same as our mid state. And if we change it to 1, then it should be exactly the same as our end state. And in between, the vertices are sort of going in between. So that's a way that you can set up this channel to control the vertex motion. We could also, I'm just going to duplicate this and move this off to the other side. We could also create a different one that does something different. And because we've got a really simple eyelid shape, this probably isn't going to be the greatest example, but let's pretend that an eyelid, when it's crying, has this little indentation out the side. Or I don't know. Whatever that's for. It's just nothing really. We can add another blend shape. So we're going to select the modified version and then the base. And then we're going to go create deformers, blend shape. In this case, we're going to turn off in between because it's just one or the other. And now we've got this blend shape 1, which we didn't name. So let's call this tear duct. I don't know why. This doesn't really make any sense. But now we've got this blend shape. And we've got this blend shape. And in fact, we can combine them together. You'll notice a problem here. This blend shape here takes precedence over this one. When we change this one, nothing happens. And that's because the deformation is happening after. So even if we set this one to 1 and it's going through the transition to this state, when we select the other one, we're transforming it into this state. If you have a bunch, like let's say you had a character's face that was happy, sad, frowning, and you would kind of do those on different parts of the object. So you would have the right eyebrow up and then down, and the left eyebrow up and down, and then you would have smiling and frowning, and you can combine these blend shapes together to create different facial expressions and stuff like that. And this is an instance where you could also reorder the inputs. So this is kind of the idea. You could move. Come on. There we go. You could change the blend shapes around, and now this one happens first, or this one takes precedence and overrides the other one. Okay, so originally I had added this sort of tear duct blend shape to our base with just going create deformers blend shape. But because that created a whole new input, we could only really have the one or the other, and the input that was after it was overriding the effect. But the nice thing about blend shapes, and what I completely sort of missed when I was explaining, is that they can be combined together if they're all within the same blend shape. And so what instead we want to do is we want to select the modified, or the sort of the target, and then the base. And then instead of creating a new deformer, we can just edit the blend shape. So if we go edit blend shape add, we can go to the option box. And we could specify the node. in which case we've got eyelid blank, but because we've got it selected, it should find that automatically. But we can just specify the node. And this would be a way to also add in-betweens. If you had created a few in-betweens and you realized you wanted another one to sort of support that, the change, what I mentioned sort of during the break was that because these are sort of just blending linearly between states, because this sort of, the eyelid closes an arcing movement, but the states, going between the states, it just changes linearly. Sometimes you get strange results where the vertices just kind of squash together and then kind of come back out because it's kind of an unintelligent system, right? They're just going directly to their target. So all that to say is you could add another in between, and that's why I've got two different states for the eyelid. If we just went from open directly to closed, then the vertices would just move linearly there. But because we've kind of got this in between state, it's a little bit more convincing. Anyway, so we can add this, and now in the input, we still only have one blend shape input, but we have two different sliders here. So this one slider has the open and closed, and the other slider has this little tear duct thing. And again, I don't know why I decided to do that, but there it is. But we can also have both states together. So you can see that now we've got the states kind of acting in concert together and independently. So, and that's how you could get, like I was just saying, you could have the upper lid as one and the lower lid as the other, and you could animate them independently and have a bit more control over that. So again, that was in the edit deformers. We also have the under window animation editors, we also have the blend shape editor, and this is a little bit more of a intuitive UI for setting this up. This will show all of our blend shapes. So here we've got our eyelid, and we can use the sliders here to manipulate those. We can delete it. We can key them when we're doing the animation, and if there were other things, other blend shapes here, we could kind of, if we had like 7 or 8, then we could have them all lined up and sort of animate them that way. So that's just a little bit more about blend shapes and a little bit of a better workflow for setting them up. So